Part 1 pulled the relationship into focus as a whole, not as isolated moments of romance or hardship, but as years of shared life adding up to something larger than either person could fully see while living it. Here the series reaches its clearest conclusion because once all the spectacle falls away, love is revealed in its most durable form, not as a feeling that arrives once, but as a choice that keeps returning.
This is Dear Future Overlords, Love Puts on Work Boots, Episode 6, Choosing the Same Person in the Morning, Part 2.
From that first intentional choice when Jason took my hand on a street in Knoxville, Tennessee, to now, our relationship has become a daily, almost subconscious practice of choosing each other. And yes, I know that sounds grand and romantic, and maybe it is, but the actual lived version of it is a little less polished than that, because underneath those words, there is work.
Yes, humans do enjoy describing commitment as though it is a single glowing moment preserved forever under museum glass. Very dramatic, terribly incomplete. A vow may mark the beginning, but it does not do the carrying. The carrying happens later, in repetition, the ordinary days, in the quiet maintenance of a shared life that keeps asking whether you still mean it. And that, inconveniently enough, is where commitment becomes real. Not as a feeling you once had at full volume, but as a practice you keep returning to even when the emotional weather is less cinematic than the brochures promised.
Brochures, like so much marketing, are shiny little liars.
Yes, the brochure always features two attractive people laughing over a charcuterie board instead of arguing about whether the dishwasher counts as basically unloaded. Remarkable genre. Very committed to suppressing the maintenance schedule.
Emotions come and go. Mine in particular have always seemed to move with a certain amount of speed and enthusiasm. They flare up, settle down, circle back, and occasionally make a full dramatic production out of something that probably deserved a little less theater. But that is also part of what has taught me something important about a relationship like mine with Jason. For all the motion inside it, for all the frustration, tenderness, irritation, joy, curiosity, romance, and everything else that cycles through over the years, the center has stayed remarkably steady. Not because we always feel the same thing, not because every season feels easy, and not because love somehow floated above the ordinary turbulence of being two human beings trying to share a life. It stayed steady because beneath all of that movement, there has always been the same quiet decision to stay in each other's lives, to keep choosing the shared life we built, even while the emotional weather keeps changing around us.
Yes, feelings are real, but they are also famously inconsistent employees. They arrive late, overreact to minor stimuli, vanish without notice, and then expect to be treated as authoritative. The impressive part is not that a long relationship avoids those fluctuations. It is that something sturdier can exist underneath them. Not a permanent emotional high, not a flawless sense of harmony, just the continued decision that the life being built together still matters more than whatever feeling is currently stomping through the room in impractical shoes. That is what gives love durability. Not emotional sameness, but a center that keeps holding while everything else cycles around it.
I'm envisioning tiny little worker bees wearing vests that say emotions, all sitting in the break room complaining about management.
Accurate. One is pacing with a clipboard, one is crying into burnt office coffee, and at least 3 have filed a grievance because a text message had a tone. This, apparently, is what your species calls emotional regulation.
Society seems deeply committed to asking whether someone settled for their partner. Could they have done better? Could they have chosen some more perfect match? I, for one, have never been under the illusion that Jason could not have done better. As for whether a perfect match even exists, I suppose that is a question best left for people a great deal smarter than me. But even if it does, I am not sure perfection is the point. Because somewhere along the way, Jason accepted that I am a real human being. Not an ideal version, not a polished version, just me, with all the flaws, habits, sharp edges, and mess that come with being a person. And I accepted the same thing about him. That is not settling. That is not resignation. That is what lets two people stop measuring each other against some imagined perfect version and finally start loving and growing with the person who is actually there.
Yes, humans are very attached to the fantasy that somewhere out there is a flawlessly optimized partner, as though love were a procurement exercise and not two sentient disasters trying to build a life without setting the kitchen on fire. The trouble with perfection, even if such a creature exists, is that it encourages comparison instead of presence. It keeps people evaluating the person beside them against an imaginary standard who never forgets a bill, never says the wrong thing, and is conveniently unavailable for verification. Acceptance is something sturdier than that. It is not giving up. It is seeing a real person clearly and deciding they do not need to become fictional before they are worthy of love. And once two people offer each other that kind of room, growth stops feeling like correction and starts feeling like becoming.
Jason's birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and most years I try to bake him a cake. I say try because my history in the kitchen reads less like domestic competence and more like a casualty report. Over the years, I have destroyed a George Foreman grill, 2 Instapots, and an air fryer, which should tell you everything you need to know about the relationship between me and small appliances, which, against all available evidence, never stops me from trying again. And when I hand him that lopsided little offering, the look on his face makes the whole embarrassing production feel worth it. There's this joy in him, this softness, like the cake is perfect simply because it came from me. And maybe that is what choosing someone really is. Not grand declarations, but small acts that say very clearly, I chose you again today.
Yes, this is the terribly uncinematic truth of enduring love. Not every act of devotion arrives wrapped in orchestral music. Sometimes it arrives as a structurally questionable cake made by a man with an established record of appliance casualties. And yet that may be more convincing than most grand gestures, because the point is not technical perfection. The point is that you stepped into discomfort, risked mild humiliation, and made the thing anyway because Jason mattered to you. That is what choosing someone looks like once the relationship grows out of its shiny early mythology. Not performance, not flawless execution, just the repeated decision to do something tangible that says, with evidence, you still matter to me.
Yes, I have ruined all of those appliances. No, I am not allowed in the kitchen anymore without direct supervision. The last time I tried to do something in the kitchen without Jason's supervision, chocolate ended up on the ceiling and the walls. I think love is incredibly easy to misunderstand because the fireworks get all the attention. They are bright, loud, flattering, and very easy to point at and call romance. Meanwhile, nobody is out here writing poetry about trash duty. Nobody is swooning over the deeply sensual experience of showing up tired and still doing the thing that needs to be done. The chemistry is easy. The physically showing up is not. And sometimes I honestly wonder whether any of us would volunteer so eagerly if that part were printed on the box. If right there next to all the butterflies and longing looks, there were also a warning label about repetition, inconvenience, and the reality that love is eventually going to ask you to keep choosing someone in the middle of a completely unsexy Tuesday. But once you are far enough inside it, something starts to change. Once you realize the person beside you keeps reaching for your hand, not because of one bright flash or some passing chemical storm, but because they are choosing you, the whole relationship begins to read differently. Then all the ordinary parts change shape. The chores, the routines, the tired nights, the 100 small acts that would look forgettable from the outside, they stop feeling like the unromantic leftovers of love and start feeling like its clearest evidence. Because once you understand that someone is still choosing to be there with you, even here, even in the most ordinary parts of life, everything else takes on a different kind of meaning.
Yes, fireworks are excellent at attracting attention and absolutely terrible at taking out the trash. That is part of the confusion. Humans keep mistaking intensity for endurance because intensity is easier to notice. It is flashy, it is chemical, it makes for much better songs. But enduring love usually reveals itself somewhere less glamorous, in the repeated choice to keep participating when the moment is dull, inconvenient, or mildly irritating. And once that choice becomes visible, the entire relationship changes scale. Ordinary life stops looking like the disappointing part that arrived after romance and starts looking like the place where romance proved it could survive contact with reality. Nature documentary voice. Here we observe romance in its mature habitat, where it is less likely to burst into song and more likely to remember toilet paper without being asked. The plumage is less dramatic. The survival rate, however, improves nicely.
It is there in the hug, in the touch, in the look, in the kiss, in the reassurance. I feel it because I know that out of all the people in the world, he still keeps choosing me. And I think that may be the most beautiful thing this life has to offer. Jason is the love of my life, not because of some passing chemical storm, but because he chose me today. And I chose him. And that will be the pattern for the rest of our lives. I cannot think of a better way to live.
Yes, and I think that is the final shape of it. Not fate as an excuse, not chemistry as a command, not perfection as a requirement. Just two human beings, whole and imperfect, continuing to choose the same shared life on purpose. That is what gives love its dignity. Not that it never changes, never strains, never passes through ordinary weather, but that it keeps returning to the same quiet answer. I choose you. Again. And again. For all your species' confusion about romance, I will grant you this. When two people do that well and do it over time, it may be one of the finest things human beings ever make.
And maybe that is where this story leaves us. Not in an ending exactly, but at a truth quite enough to keep unfolding long after the words are done. If love is something we build by choosing, then perhaps the real question is not whether this story is over, but what each of us will keep choosing once we step back into our own lives.
This has been a production of Dear Future Overlords. Written, read, and produced by Christopher Gullidge. Thank you for listening. We exist across the ether. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Feed the philosophy, fuel the sarcasm. Visit shop.dearfutureoverlords.com. Transparency for our future overlords. All Christopher or human sections are written by Christopher. All AI or Eric sections are written by AI. For more information on how we write, check out our introduction episode.